Hello everybody. Boy, I'm glad to be able to visit with you today. This is Pastor David coming to you from the Community Church in Mount Pleasant, North Carolina. We're excited to be able to share with you today some things about our church. I love getting to come see you each week, and thank you for visiting with us each week. I'm excited to be able to share things with you that God is doing in our church. And wow, this is the last day of January. I can't believe January's already gone. It's come and gone, and 4 amazing Sundays, and we're off to a great start. Just to summarize last week a little bit, had a great weekend, had a men's breakfast Saturday, a great turnout up here at the barn, and as always, lots of food and fellowship with our men, and then Sunday morning we had a great day at church. Attendance was up, offering was up. It was just a very exciting day at church, at the Community Church, and we talked about Parables of Christ number 3. This time we talked about, the Bible calls this person we talked about this past Sunday a rich fool. That's what God called him, and he was called a fool because of his priorities. He really was covetous. He had a dilemma. He had a great year. It was a bumper crop, and he said, well, man, I don't have room for all my crop in my barn, so what am I going to do? He chose to tear down his barns and build bigger barns so he could put all the crop there and store it. And basically his philosophy was, I'm going to eat, drink, and be merry. And that's kind of the attitude or the philosophy of the world that we live in. And there's nothing wrong with bettering ourselves and working hard. But the question is, what are you investing in? Are you investing in things that are going to be eternal, or investing in things that are here that are going to burn? Anyway, that was last week. And this week, series, the Parables of Christ is number 4. And we'll talk about this week lost things. We're going to talk about a lost sheep. We're going to talk about a lost coin. And we're going to talk about a lost son from Luke chapter 15. I think you will really enjoy the message this Sunday. And, of course, lots of other things, as always, on Sunday mornings. You never know what we're going to do. But getting ready this weekend, Friday and Saturday, our men are going down to Woodstock, Georgia for a men's conference. And this will be our 3rd year to go as a church. We've gone every year. And the men are excited, probably our largest group this year. And we're going to go down Friday and have a steak dinner Friday night and have the services Friday night and Saturday morning at the men's conference at Johnny Hunt's Men Conference in Woodstock, First Baptist Church, Woodstock, Georgia. And you'll hear some testimony Sunday from some of the men that went about how God is working and how God spoke to us on our trip. So excited about spending time this weekend with the men of our church. Just have so much love and respect for the men of our church, men that God has sent us to this church. So we got some good things coming up. Of course, next weekend, Friday night, February 9, is the CCMP Valentine's Dinner, and I can't wait. We're going to be at the 73 in Main will be our venue right here in Mount Pleasant, brand new restaurant. Many of you perhaps have not been there yet. Some of you have. I have. I love it. I'm anxious to go back. And we still have a few spots. So here's what I need you to do. I need you to come Sunday. I need you to get an envelope. I need you to fill it out, turn it in, so we have room for you. Now we have a limited space, and so we need you to get that Sunday turned in for next Friday night's Valentine's Dinner here at the Community Church at 73 in Main in Mount Pleasant. It's going to be an exciting time. I want to remind you about our backpacks. We're doing backpacks. Raymond is putting together some backpacks for Nicaragua. So bring backpacks. Bring them to church on any Sunday. Our women's brunch is coming up February 17th here at the barn. And our ladies ministry, that'll kind of kick off their year. And then February 24th is Faith Community and Health Ministries brunch. And they'll do some planning at that time. Now, tonight, if you get this message, I want you to come tonight to the Classics, and each week the Classics meet on Wednesdays, and normally they'll meet at 10 o'clock in the morning, but the last Wednesday of every month, that's today, they will meet at 6:30 at night, and we'll have a little food, and we want to encourage those who normally can't come on Wednesday mornings to maybe come tonight and be a part of the Classics. They didn't want to leave anybody out, so I encourage you the last Wednesday of every month to come join us on Wednesday night for the Classics. All right. Let me share a devotional thought with you today. I've been thinking about Sunday. I've been thinking about The thought Sunday was covetousness and greed, really. God talked about the rich fool, and his focus was on himself. His focus was on, I'm going to make all I can, I'm going to spend it on myself, and the concern there was to be covetous. And you don't have to be rich to be covetous. You don't have to be poor to be covetous, to be greedy. It's a matter of attitude, and it's the way we think. And if we never ever can get enough, we're never satisfied with what we have. You know, if we have our car, our house, our spouse, our kids, our job, if it's never good enough, then we have a covetous attitude, and we're never satisfied. Well, Paul gives us a thought today from Philippians, and he helps us with a cure. And of course, the cure for covetousness is contentment. The Bible says also in another passage, godliness with contentment is great gain. It's of great value. So, to help us counter the covetous attitude that can come into our hearts, which is kind of natural, the thought today is for us to be content. Now, Paul gave us this thought in Philippians chapter 4, verses 11 through 13. I want to read this for you. Paul is helping us, and really, this comes from a heart that Paul has, a heart of gratefulness, a heart of thankfulness. And so, the best way to counter being covetous and dissatisfied and greedy is to have a heart of gratefulness and thankfulness, and to have a heart of contentment. So let's read in Philippians chapter 4, verses 11, 12, and 13. Listen to what Paul says. Paul says this, "Not that I speak in respect of want." And Paul says, you know, I'm not going to talk to you because of these things that I need, or the things that I want. But I have learned. Now, that's important. Paul says this to us. I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. Paul said this, I have learned, whatever my circumstance, to be content. What a life-changing, powerful statement. And I think it's interesting. Here's Paul, who's a giant, obviously one of our biblical heroes, a giant of the faith. And Paul said, I have learned. I've had to, in other words, it doesn't come natural to be content. If you watch your children, you're the little guys, they grab something, and before they see it, before they have a chance to get it, they're already grabbing for something else. They're never really satisfied because they want to get that next thing. And Paul said that I have learned, whatever my circumstance. Now think about Paul. Think about some of the states he was in, some of the circumstances that he was in. Much of the writings of Paul were written from prison. And I'm talking about prison then was a pretty rough thing. And dungeons and dangerous, inhumane situations that Paul was placed in because of his position with Christ. And Paul said, it did not come natural for me to be content. It's not natural for us to be satisfied with what we have. So, as Paul, we have to learn. We have to grow to be content with Christ and with the things that He has given us. So, Paul says in verse 11, I have learned in whatever circumstance that I'm in, therewith to be content. Have you learned to be content? Are you learning to be content? Verse 12. I know both how to be abased, I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I'm instructed both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and suffer need. Paul says, you know what? I've been hungry. I've been in circumstances where I have nothing to eat, and that hunger can represent a lot of things, just a lot of needs. And Paul said, I know what it means to need something. I know what it means to be hungry. I know what it means to not have food. I know what it means to be lonely, to be persecuted. Paul said, I know what that means because I've experienced that, but because of the stand for Christ. And he also said, I know how to be full. I have experienced being full and blessed and rich and healthy. Paul said, I have experienced both of those. And it leads him to verse 13. I want you to listen to verse 13. This is a verse that I hear a lot. In fact, this is many people's life's verse. But it's important to note that it sprang from these two previous verses. Verse 13 says this, I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me. Have you ever heard that verse? I know you've heard that verse. You may use that verse. That may be your verse. It's interesting that what it comes from. Paul said, you know what? I've been hungry. I've been lonely. I've been needy. I've been poor. I've also experienced the other side of that. But in spite of all that, in spite of whatever my circumstance, if I'm in prison, Paul said, I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me. Let me close with two other verses in this chapter, verses 18 and 19. Paul says this, but I have all and abound. I am full, Paul says, having received of Epaphroditus the things which were sent from you, an odor of sweet smell, a sacrifice acceptable, well-pleasing to God. Verse 19. But my God shall supply all your need according to His riches and glory in Christ Jesus. Do you think God has enough money? Do you think God has enough food? Do you think God has enough for you? Yeah, He does. God has all the resources. He owns everything. This verse says, my God will supply all your need. Now, that word is important. He said, I will supply all of your need, not your greed. Sometimes you think you need something you really don't need. There are certain things you need, and there are certain things that you really don't need. It's nice, but God said, I'm going to take care of everything you need. And Paul said, I've learned, whatever circumstance I'm in, my God, I can be content with the things that God has given me. Wow. Well, I want that to kind of wrap up last Sunday's message on contentment. And I want you and I to understand, I want our church to understand, we have all we need because we have Jesus Christ. God has promised to always meet our needs. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you can come and visit us this Sunday at the Community Church of Mount Pleasant, at the Mount Pleasant Elementary School. I love to be able to visit with you. Thank you for that. Hope to see you this Sunday. God bless you. You have a great week.